Again, we're excited that you're here to worship with us. Today we're sort of starting not a real whole series, but we're just focusing on this Thanksgiving time of year. And today we're going to be looking at that as well as next week, and then we'll dive right into the Christmas season. Can you believe it's almost here? Before you blink, it will be gone. The holidays seem to fly by. Maybe many of you are in here were like I was. As soon as I turned 16, I went and got a job. And I had several part-time jobs, and they led later in life to some full-time jobs and different things. And I always kept running into a problem. And when I was 16, I got hired at Golden Corral. Now, Golden Corral then wasn't the Golden Corral today. It was go through a line, order a steak. If you really wanted a salad bar, they had a great salad bar. But I was hired as a dishwasher, which in the restaurant world is the bottom of the totem pole. You go, manager, assistant manager, cook, chef, waiter, prep guy, potato guy, all of that. And then you get down here and there's the dishwasher. And that's what I was hired to do. I was the last guy hired. So not only I was the lowest on the totem pole, I was lowest of the lowest on the totem pole because I was the last dishwasher hired, and went and worked and was going to school and doing that, and through a variety of things, people quitting, me getting promoted, different things, I made it to this ceiling, and it was really a weird age ceiling because they told me we can't promote you anymore or pay you anymore until you turn 18. And so I was like, well, I don't want to do this for 2 years just because I'm 16 years old and 17 years old. So I went and actually found another job and did that for a while. Then went and found another job at Advanced Auto Parts. And now, if any of you know me and you hear Advanced Auto Parts, you chuckle because you know that I know nothing about cars. I don't change my own oil. I don't pull my engine out on Saturdays just for fun. I mean, if I have a problem, I have a mechanic at the end of the street that I call up, and he'll, like, even if there's a leak, I'm like, dude, I don't know what's leaking. There's just a puddle in my floor. What's going on? But I got hired at Advanced Auto Parts because I could sell stuff. And there again, I was the last person hired as a part-time salesperson at Advanced Auto Parts. So in the hierarchy of that store, again, lowest of the low. You couldn't go lower than me. I started out with about 15 hours a week. I did that for a while, and there again, through a variety of attrition, some people getting promoted, some people getting fired, me getting promoted, I made it all the way up to the highest paid hourly employee at Advanced Auto Parts. I had a set of keys to the store. I could open the store, close the store, had a lot of responsibilities, but they told me there, I was 20, and they said, we can't promote you again until you're 23. So there again, I'm like, well, I'm not going to do this for 3 years while I'm waiting to turn 23. And so I went and I actually found my first full-time job. I mean, my first 40 hours a week, Monday through Friday, some Saturdays, go in, work. I did a lot of bookkeeping work and all of that, and did that for several years. And they brought me in one day and they said, you're the future of our company. You're the future of our company. And I don't know if you've ever had anybody come and tell you that, but if they do, it makes you feel pretty good. And there again, I was like 25 years old when they told me that. But you're the future of our company. The only hiccup in that was I was going to have to wait 15 to 18 years for the person above me to retire. And then, once I would take over this company, I was going to have to do that for another 20, 25 years. So I'm sitting there looking, I'm going, for 40 years? Is this what I want to do for 40 years? It was a secure job. It was a stable job. It was a good, good guy to work for, good company to work for. But I was like, for 40 years, is this what I want to do? Do I want to wait around, first of all, for 15 years just to get promoted? I mean, I always seem to run into this like ceiling that because of my age, I just wasn't going to get any further in those companies. And so I became very restless and really dissatisfied and really impatient. And I think God saw that and He said, well, I'll just rock your world. And so I'm going to take you out of that and I'm going to put you in ministry. And in ministry, life is exciting and every week is different. And, you don't know what you're going to do for the next 2 years or the next 2 months or whatever the case may be. And so I think God just said, you're restless? I'll take care of that restlessness. And God moved me into ministry. And I've been in ministry now for almost 20 years. I tell you all of that because that day when I thought about working at that company and waiting 15 years for somebody to retire and then working there 20 years, I asked this question, is this it? I mean, is this all that there is to this life? I mean, it is my ambition in life, is my drive in life that I'm going to wait around for 15 years for this guy to retire. And then I'm going to take his job, and for the next 20 years, I'm going to do that. And maybe you've asked yourself that question. Maybe you've been in a spot or in a career, and maybe you've done it for a while, and you just say, is this it? Like, is this the pinnacle? Is this the highlight of my life? Is what's all tied up into this job that I'm doing? The reason I want to talk about that today, because many of us deal with that question. Many of us face that. You may face it in your career. Obviously, that's what I've sort of talked about this morning. But you may face it in your marriage. You may face it in your relationships. You may face it in the people that you connect with, both inside church, outside of church. You may be waking up in the morning and as you and your spouse sit across the table drinking your morning coffee, you say, is this it? Is this all we have to look forward to? Your kids are growing up and so maybe you're asking yourself that same question. Is this it? Is this all that there is? Today I want to talk about a word that is really the missing ingredient to the Thanksgiving holiday. And that word is contentment. Not contentment, that's different, but contentment. And I want to talk about that because I really believe that this is the missing ingredients to the Thanksgiving holiday. Because let me tell you how Thanksgiving is going to play out, probably at your house as it will at mine. Thanksgiving Day, whether a little family, whether it's just your immediate family or whether a bunch of family gets together, you get together, you make a bunch of food. The kitchen is just boiling with things on the stove and things in the oven and things in the microwave, and it all gets laid out on the table, and everybody comes in and gathers around, and you're going to say a Thanksgiving prayer. Maybe it's the patriarch of your family. Maybe it's the oldest male in the room or whatever. And they're going to start a prayer. And they're going to thank God and be thankful that day in that prayer. God, thank you for this. Thank you for family. Thank you for this food. Thank you for this day. And some of you are going to even take it to a little another level, because all that week of Thanksgiving, you're just going to get giddy about Thanksgiving. I mean, maybe you're going to travel. I know we're leaving like on Tuesday that week, and we're going to go visit some family. And so you get a little excited, a little anticipation builds up of getting together. And you see everybody and you hug and you kiss. And you're just like, man, great to see you. Pat on the back. Let's catch up. And so you take Thanksgiving even to a little another level. Some of you I've seen on Facebook have even taken it to another level, in that you are doing the Thankful November every day. You're thankful for something and you sort of post what you're thankful for that day. I haven't seen my name yet in any of those. But anyway, but you're doing that. So you're sort of even taking it to a whole nother level. You're saying like, look, this whole month of November, every day I'm going to think about something that I'm thankful for. But what happens the other 11 months out of the year? Because I'll just tell you, as soon as that Thanksgiving lunch is over, your mind switches to Christmas. And then, Christmas comes like a flash, and then January hits, and you're thinking about taxes. And taxes hit, and you get through that. I mean, and we just get into this rut, if you will, of life. And though we're thankful Thanksgiving Day, and some of us Thanksgiving week, a lot of us do not live a thankful life. In fact, if we could put private recorders in your ear and take it everywhere you went, we would find out that most of us, instead of living a thankful life, we really live a griping life. And instead of being thankful for a lot of things, most of us spend more time griping about the things we aren't happy with or don't like versus being thankful for the things that we have in our life. And so today I want to talk about what it means to be content, because this is a battle that all of us face. I mean, this is what is behind the midlife crisis. You've heard of that? The midlife crisis? Because you spend 20 years doing something and you get to a certain age and stage in life and you ask yourself and you say to yourself consciously, is this all that there is? So today I want to talk about what it means to be content, because it's a battle that all of us face. Adam and Eve faced it. First people ever created, placed in this utopia of a garden. They didn't have to work for their food. They didn't have to farm the vegetables out of the ground. They didn't have to run sprinkler systems to make things grow. I mean, they were placed in this garden, this perfect place as you could be, and they had access to everything that was there except one thing. And they couldn't even be content with all that they had until they went after that one thing. We know that as the tree that God had forbade them to eat from, and they went and ate the apple, and because of that introduced sin into the world that has changed us all forever. And so you and I battle with this idea of being content, of being thankful for what we do have instead of griping for what we don't have. Now let me just start by telling you what contentment is not, because I don't want you to be confused. Contentment is not laziness. Contentment is not laziness. It's not that attitude of, I'm just going to sit here and let God give me everything that I want. It's not just saying, look, I'm not going to go get a job. I just know God's going to give me all the food that I want. I'm not going to work on this relationship. I'm just going to let God make it all right. I'm not going to work on my marriage. I'm just going to let God make that all right. I'm not going to worry about raising my kids. I'm just going to let God work all that out. Contentment is not laziness. It's also not presumption. It's also not presumption. It's not that attitude of, I know God is going to give me fill in the blank. I know God is going to give me a new car. I know God is going to give me a new spouse. I know God is going to give me great children. I know God is going to give me all the money that I want. It's not laziness, and it's not presumption, and it's not settling. Being content is not about asking that question of, is this all that there is? Here's what Charles Spurgeon, the great preacher, said about contentment. He said, you say if I had a little more, I should be very satisfied. He said, you make a mistake. If you are not content with what you have, you will not be satisfied if it was doubled. Great insight there by the great preacher. Another preacher I found this week, and I've never heard of this guy before, but an interesting story. His name is Jeremiah Burroughs. He was born in 1599. It's pretty cool when you find somebody that was born all that long ago and you look at their life and things that were happening in the 1600s. And he was very much a preacher of the word. He actually died at age 47, so he did not live a long life. He wasn't one of those that lived for 90 years and then got to the end and said, well, here's what I think about all this. He got it early on. He said, Christian contentment is that sweet, inward, quiet, gracious frame of spirit, which freely submits to and delights in God's wise and fatherly disposal in every condition. It's that contentment is that attitude and that life where we understand that God is seeing the big picture and we are not. See, one of the biggest struggles I have, I don't know about you, but one of the biggest struggles I have is not seeing the big picture. You know, I mean, I wish when I see baby Ellen, I wish I could look and say, okay, at 18, she's going to be this, and at 25, she's going to be this, and at 35, she's going to be this. I mean, but we can't see that gap. We can't see that big picture. And many times we get frustrated with that big picture, and many times there's something going on in your life that you just see what is right here while God is looking at the big picture. You're going through a trial. You're going through a tough struggle. You're going through a tough time, and all you can see is this, and you would say, God, why me? Or God, why is this happening? Or God, why are you allowing this? But in the end, God sees the whole big picture. And that contentment, to be content, is that idea of living today knowing that God sees the big picture. And because God sees the big picture, He does know what baby Elowen's going to be like at 18. He does know what 25 is going to look like in her life. He does know what 35 is going to be like in her life. And so sometimes when we struggle because we cannot see that big picture, contentment is that understanding and being solid in the fact that we know that God sees the big picture, even though we may not. Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes, he said, everything is everything is wearisome beyond description. No matter how much we see, we're never satisfied. And no matter how much we hear, we are not content. So what does it mean to be content? Why do we need to live in a life of contentment? Why do we need to live a life that is content, understanding that God sees the big picture? Paul wrote a letter to a group of believers in a place, and the place was called Philippi, and so consequently the letter is called Philippians. We call it a book in the Bible in the New Testament. And he wrote this letter to the Philippians. And he's trying to teach them and train them and talk to them and thank them because they have encouraged him in his ministry. They have supported him financially. They have helped him get from point A to point B to point C and point D on his journeys. They have aided his ministry. And so part of it is he's just saying, look, I'm really thankful for you guys. You guys have been a partner in the ministry. You guys have helped me down the road. You guys have been with me and understand what I'm going through. And he writes this letter in Philippians chapter 4. It has several verses that if you grew up in church, you probably memorized at some point. But when you read them all together, it's pretty neat how they jump out. Here's what it says. Beginning in verse 4. It says, always be full of joy in the Lord. I say again, rejoice. Let everyone see that you are considerate in all that you do. Remember, the Lord is coming soon. It says, verse 6 says, do not worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all that He has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and your minds as you live in Christ Jesus. Now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Keep putting into practice all that you learned and received from me, everything you have heard from me, and everything that you have saw me doing. Then the God of peace will be with you. How I praise the Lord that you are concerned about me again. I know you have always been concerned for me, but you didn't have the chance to help me. Verse 11, not that I was ever in need, for I have learned how to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I have learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it is with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little. For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. Even so, you have done well to share with me in my present difficulty. Paul here talks to these people about what it means to have the joy of the Lord and what it means to have the peace of God in their lives. And there where he says he has learned how to live on almost nothing, yes, he has learned how to live on almost nothing. And where it says he's learned in life that he has had everything, he really has. There was a time in his life when Paul had the best education, the best family lineage, the best career, rising superstar, rising to fame, rising to success, driving to the top. He had everything. He would say he had the world at his feet. And here's what's sort of funny in your life and mine, because that was before Paul met Christ. And when Paul met Christ on the road to Damascus and God saved his life, Paul found himself not on the rise to success and the rise to fame. He found himself in prison. And he didn't find himself with everybody coming and wanting to give him accolades. He found people wanting to chase him and beat him and kill him. And in the world's view, and maybe you would say, well, Paul, doesn't that seem a little reversed? Doesn't it seem like maybe before Christ everything wasn't going so well? And here's the problem that you and I face. You and I look at it in the worldly view instead of the eternal view. Because Paul said in another letter, he considered everything that he had in this world before Christ as dung. He said everything that he had, and he did have everything, he considered it nothing because of what Christ had done for him and because of the eternity that he had in Christ. Now here's the kicker to Philippians chapter 4. In fact, here's the kicker to the whole book of Philippians if you want to go home and read it. Paul was sitting in prison when he wrote it. And it wasn't a federal pen where it was like a country club. I mean, he was in a dungeon. He was in chains. The sanitation was not their concern in those prisons in those days. And so here's a man who has turned his life over to Christ and is sitting in the prison, and he is saying to these people, I have learned how to be content in whatever I have. When we're content, it brings us a few things. When we're content, understanding that God sees the whole picture, even though we may not, it helps us find joy. It helps us find true joy. Another thing that when we're content that it does is it helps us be considerate. You realize that when you're content in life, you can be a lot nicer to people? In fact, I don't know if you might even play this game, but go around where you work, just in your mind, just visualize the people that you work with. And if you visualize the rudest, meanest, nastiest people that you work with, chances are they're not content, very content in life. And yet if you go around where you work and you think about, well, who is really nice? Who's really pleasant to be around? I mean, who will I go see on Monday? And they'll actually have a smile on their face. You start to think about those people, and what you'll find out is they're probably pretty content. You can be a lot nicer when you're content. You can be a lot nicer when you understand that wherever you are in life, that God is seeing the big picture while you're only seeing the short story. Not only that, when you're content, it helps you find peace. You see, sometimes we strive so hard to push, to get to the next level on the ladder, to get the next promotion, to get the next size house, to get the next great car, to get the next 401k, sometimes we strive so hard in that there's such pressure on our lives that we have no peace. And it's amazing to me when you watch the news and read the stories you see stories of millionaires who take their lives. You see the stories of people who have everything worldly that we think that you would want, and yet they find themselves in a dark place and they come to the place of taking their own lives. It's all about contentment. When you can find and live in being content, you can have peace. Because when you're content, what you're basically doing, you're saying, I trust God. I'm trusting that He sees the whole picture. I'm trusting that He sees not just the 60 days that I see, but He sees the 6 years down the road. That He sees the next 20 years of my life. At 18, would I have ever guessed that I'd be living in Georgia? Would I have ever guessed that I would have started a church? Would I have ever guessed that I would have been in ministry? Would I have ever guessed any of those things? No. But God the whole time saw the whole story. And He not only sees my story, He sees your story as well. And maybe you've gone through things in the past and maybe you start to say, well, why did this happen? You just need to understand, He sees the whole story. You may say, well, I don't understand. And it's true. I mean, how many times did we read in that passage that we won't necessarily understand? But we can trust God and know that He sees the whole picture and the whole story. Paul wrote another letter to a guy that he was sort of mentoring, this young man named Timothy. And Paul wrote, again, letters to Timothy. And he wrote the first letter, it's called 1 Timothy. And he wrote a second letter, and it's called 2 Timothy. And they're in the New Testament as well. And he's writing to this young guy because he's trying to help him grow in his understanding of the ministry. He's trying to help him grow in his understanding of what all is going on. And Paul had experienced so much in his life, and he's trying to help this young guy. And maybe you've been in that kind of a situation before, but here's what he says in 1 Timothy chapter 6. It says, true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into this world. And we can't take anything out of it with us when we leave. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. You see, what's missing the Friday after Thanksgiving in most of our lives is contentment. Will you be thankful Thursday, Thanksgiving Day? Yeah. Man, you're going to walk into that kitchen or that dining room and you're going to see turkey and gravy, and mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce and stuffing with onions and stuffing in the turkey, and you're just going to see stuffing. And you're going to sit down and eat, and you're going to sit there and eat and eat and eat, and you're going to say, I can't eat another bite. Oh, wow. And depending on how much turkey you had, you're either going to go watch a football game or lay in the couch while the football game goes on and fall asleep. You'll be thankful Thanksgiving Day. You may even be thankful that week as some family come into town, and maybe family you haven't seen in a while, and you get together at grandma's house, or you get together at somebody's house, and there's hugs and kisses and pats on the back, and man, let's catch up, and great to see you. You'll be thankful that week. Some of you have spent this whole month going, I'm thankful for this, and I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for this. But what happens December 1st, January 1st, February 1st? You see, the key to living a thankful life instead of a thankful day is contentment. Of understanding whatever you're going through, that God sees the big picture. Even though you can only see a few moments, maybe a few hours, maybe a few days, God sees the story of your life. And just like baby Elowen, when He planned her and He formed her in her mother's womb, and He has a plan for you, He has a plan for you as well. And so when you can rest in the fact that God has a plan for you, you can learn how to be content, which will then make it so much easier for you to be thankful instead of griping. As we go into this Thanksgiving season, I just want to challenge you to begin to try to learn to be content. That really starts just with your faith and your trust in God. Knowing that He sees the picture of your life. He has a plan for your life. He has sent His Son to die on the cross so that a relationship could be restored between you and Him. And I want to encourage you over these next several weeks as we head toward Thanksgiving Day, and we do sit down at these tables and have just great times with our family maybe, that you'll be content that day, and the day after, and the week after. Let's pray.